we are now recording the session, so I'll put this back up for the time being.
Yeah.
And then I
got
guess
another link you guys can test in the comments. Let me know if that one works for you.
All right, Jack. That one works, Juan.
Okay, great.
Okay. Okay. So we're coming up on 6:30, and in consideration of Juan's schedule, first I want to thank him for joining us tonight. I don't know. I assume you all know that Juan, in addition to being the president of IT Impact, was the founder of the Access User Group organization. And I think the Access community as a whole really owes Juan a big thank you for doing that, because
Please don't do that, please. No.
let me
Yeah.
finish. It came about at a time when local user groups were starting to fade away, and it filled a void. So I won't say any more than that. But I mean, it's the organization has grown since I've been involved, and I'm pretty happy about being part of it. So, and I told Juan, rather than do all of that, I'll let him take over and introduce himself, tell you more about his organization, himself, and his presentation. And I'm going to have to stop sharing, and I believe I have to make Juan the host.
Oh no, I can just share my screen. Let me see if that works.
Okay. So
yeah.
If you
you have to make me a host. Yeah.
Yeah. So you should have that in a second.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, so let me try again. Make host. Okay, now, the pop-up was behind the other screen. That's why I couldn't see it.
No worries. All right. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep.
Here we are.
All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Juan Soto. I'm a Microsoft Access MVP, and I'm also the president of IT Impact. We're a Microsoft Gold partner out of Chicago. I'm also the founder of AccessUserGroups.org with chapters on 3 continents. And I have some news for you guys regarding the organization here later in my presentation. We're going to talk about a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, which is optimizing access for SQL Server. When I first started down this journey, there wasn't a lot of information on this topic. There was a really good book that now has been, unfortunately, really outdated to help me out a lot. So I started the blog at accessexperts.com/blog. And there I started creating posts about how to really optimize, and you can find a wealth of information on there, and you can go to my tips page at accessexperts.com/start here if this is something new for you. A lot of the material I'll be sharing with you guys today, you can find that start here post. So be sure you went look into that. You can reach me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/n/Juan Soto. You can reach me at jsoto22 at Twitter, and you can subscribe to my blog.
Can you put all that in the chat? Can you put all the links into the chat?
Yeah, I can probably do that after I'm done with these slides. Remind me, please do remind me.
Sure.
Now, I always say I'm not an expert on SQL Server. I'm an expert on optimizing access with SQL Server.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to hear in-depth discussion on clusters. The only thing I know about clusters are peanut clusters. Chocolate covered peanut clusters, which are my favorite. So
sounds good.
All right, got some AUG news. I'm taking over Access Latin America. The president of that chapter, Emilio, has moved on, and I thank him for his work there. So I'm looking forward to helping them start again in February. So I'll be in 2 weeks. I'm looking for a new chapter president. I might have a good candidate already. That's going to be in Spanish. So if you want to join us, please, you're welcome to do that. We also have a new chapter starting up later this year. Access Europe is coming online. We already have one chapter in Spain. This is also Spanish they're speaking. And our Spanish videos have the most audience on YouTube. It's amazing how those Spanish videos have the most plays on YouTube. Just really happy that we can offer an alternative for the Spanish-speaking world. But we got a new chapter starting up, and I'm looking forward to that. So stay tuned for that. I think there might be starting in March or April. Well, it hasn't been a really good day for me today. I've been fielding calls from customers all day. Turns out that the latest VBA update last month broke Access version 2201. And you're going to get this error message, Access isn't closed properly. And there's some really good solutions to that. We can downgrade from the 2201 to a prior version and disable updates, or you can place Access file in a trusted folder. I've heard some comments online that really have solved that problem temporarily, so you may want to try that. You can move, but my favorite methodology, honestly, is there's two things that really have helped me with all these issues, because this is not something new. All right, it seems like every month there's a bug in Access because of the somebody in Microsoft did something, or either the VBA team or the security team. Last month it was the security team issued a security update that ended up damaging Access. But throughout this whole experience, most of my customers have not been impacted, and I'll tell you why. Number one, they're not on the current channel in Office. They're on the semi-annual channel. Now, what I tell my clients is semi-annual channel is great if you want to see the latest features, but you also get the latest bugs. You're better off being in a semi-annual channel every 6 months, but then these things are shaken out, and other people have been impacted, and you get an update at the 6-month level that's been proven embedded. And today's example is a prime example of how you can avoid these issues. And number two, 90% of our clients are on SQL Server backends. And so there have been instances last year of bugs that have impacted Office, but not have impacted any of our clients because of the fact that they're on SQL Server and they don't have any issues with locking files or anything like that in Access. So something to keep in mind is to change your channel. And now I put this on there so you can do that.
Hey, Juan, can I ask
Yes.
you now? I heard the suggestion about the trusted folder just tonight. Actually, Daniel sent me an email privately on that. Is that a tested and known solution for this issue, or
No,
is
it's purely hearsay at this point. I haven't tested it myself. It's purely hearsay.
And this is Dale, and I can verify that I have a client who's got their application in a trusted location, and they're still having problems with this. Fortunately, only 2 out of 30 members of the client didn't have Office updates blocked, so I only had 2 people with the problem, but they were in trusted locations and they still had the problem. So,
well, the suggestion to me was that the back end be in a trusted folder.
Okay. That I hadn't seen, so I have not tested that.
Yeah. The reports that I saw were on the the tech community forum, and there were 3 or 4 people who said that was the solution. But again, that's
for the back end.
For the back end to be put into the trusted location. But
I helped a guy revert this a few hours ago, but because he needed to get back in business, he was SOL.
Yeah, I have one client that's got about 40 backends or something ridiculous. Was having a problem with 2 of them, but the rest were all right. So he was on a build that was between the two fixes. And even though he was actually using a mapped drive, he was having the problem until we updated to the build after the one that was recommended, and that fixed the problem with those other two.
Oh, that's interesting. So there is a version after 2201 that's higher?
Yeah, I can pull out the actual build numbers.
There were two 2201 versions, one January 11, and one January 26. But of course, their build numbers are different.
Okay. Yeah, that's build number specific. Now, as an Access MVP, you may or may not know this, but I have direct access to the team at Redmond, Washington, where Microsoft is located. And believe you me, they've heard an earful on this issue. And it really is upsetting to me that here we are, a new year, we have this impact. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so the VBA, they're, whatever reason it is, these updates are not being tested extensively. They're just not.
Yeah.
And so Microsoft made a
Well,
change.
they are by us.
Yeah. Well, Microsoft made a change many years ago where they fired their testers, and one of them became an Access consultant. What's his name, George? He would go to the conference and Silver Falls.
Yeah, Kevin Bell.
Kevin Bell. I mean, he was an awesome tester on the Microsoft team, the Access team, and ended up losing his job because they fired all the testers at Microsoft. They're like, no, if you're going to have to test your own code. Well, if you're not disciplined enough as a developer, it's just not going to work. I've hired developers who are great developers, but they're just terrible at testing their own code. And so I know already that they have to be paired up with a tester.
Jeff Conrad was another SDET software.
Yeah, he's still at Microsoft now. He heads up the documentation team.
Right, but he can no longer test.
Thanks for telling us that one, because I could not figure out how in the last 2 years, it seems like there's been the most obvious horrible errors that have totally impacted my clients. And, anybody should have caught that, with the most simple multi-user testing.
Well, yeah. I suspect that, I'm not defending Microsoft, but I suspect that a part of it is the December bug was a Windows update. They may have thoroughly tested it within their own little universe, but it impacted outside of their purview, which was access. And I think that's a bigger problem. The left hand doesn't necessarily know what the right hand's doing.
Well, the bigger problem is that they either don't have good access file to test or not testing, which is a big no-no. Mm-hmm. Or if they do test, they're opening a basic access database and, oh yeah, the table's open fine, and these simple forms that we have in there open fine, so it must be good, right? I mean, they need better. I suspect it's the latter, and I think they may need better examples for their own testing. Let's go ahead and keep moving on here. Thank you for the question. One of the things that I really love about SQL Server Express is that it really matches well with Access. Over the years, we've had clients to leverage SQL Server Express, and I can count on one hand the customers who had to upgrade to SQL Server Standard Edition or Enterprise Edition. I mean, I've got clients who have SQL Server Express for years, and they have not needed to upgrade it from it. And that makes a lot of sense because Access has a 2 GB limit. So these are not high volume transactional databases we're talking about here. They're not the Amazons of the world. These are mostly mom and pop operations or departmental databases that are dealing with hundreds of thousands of records and not millions of records. Now, I did once had a customer, the largest insurance company in the U.S. for storage units. And they had 100 employees on staff. And they were using SQL Server Enterprise with Access Front End. It worked fine. I mean, we did some great things for them. We had it where when the call came in from somebody who was trying to file a claim, it would record a call and then we would upload that to the SQL Server database, and then a manager can then review the call right from Access by clicking on the file. We had print spooling, where you can adjuster can approve a claim, and then the next day it would get printed in the queue, and thousands of these pages would get printed from Access every morning. So before that, it was like everybody was printing individually. They would get up, go to the printer, and then stack the files. And I'm like, that's a waste of time. Let's just stack this into a print queue. So just a wonderful examples here of being able to leverage the technology, and it just works over VPN great, right? Because Access was never designed to work over VPN. It was never designed for the cloud either, but I teach a separate course on how to optimize Access for the cloud specifically. And it's free. SQL Server Express is free. It doesn't have any automated backup, but if you use SQL Backup and FTP, that link, by the way, bit.ly is outdated, I believe. But look, just do SQL Backup and FTP. It's like $32, and it's wonderful. It'll back up to the cloud. It'll back up to another network storage. It'll alert you via email when it fails. And most of our clients, that's what they're using with SQL Server Express. And very easy to back up and restore. Just a wonderful program. Highly recommend it. There is a version in the cloud that you can use. We host a lot of our client data. So if you ever have a customer who needs to host their data in the cloud, we are Microsoft Gold partners, so we use Azure and our data center as our data center. And the nice thing about that is you're dealing with my employees. You're not dealing with Microsoft employees, and we also employ a security company to monitor our SQL Server databases, SQL servers in the cloud. So, but when you move to the cloud, there's some additional consideration. That is, you have to create a login form, you have to create users, and you have to provide administration of users in your Access program, which we already have those modules already laid out, where the administrator of the database can open up Access and add a new user to the system, and that automatically creates a database user, not a SQL Server user. There's a difference. Database users at a database level so that they can start using the application along with their roles. The problem with that is that it's not on-premise. I've had customers who started with SQL Server on-prem, and over the years, I've only had one revert back to on-prem because they were so disappointed with the speed. I'm like, I can get you. I usually shoot for 3 seconds, right? 1001, 1002, 1003. The form comes up or the report is done. And for the cloud, most people are willing to rate, but they didn't. But most people, will know. I try to curb their enthusiasm. Says cloud is going to always be different because you're looking at outside your premises. All right. Here's some additional examples of clients I've helped over the years. I've had a franchise a franchise company had multiple franchisees throughout the United States, and they were all using individual Access databases with Access backends, and they were emailing the report back to corporate along with the franchise check because there was warranties involved. We upgraded all of them to the cloud, and now they're using Access, but the data is in the cloud. And actually, recently we upgraded them to a web app because a lot of my Access developers are web developers because they love that. I had this foam mattress manufacturer that we helped. They have They have 15 plants around the U.S. I had a chance to tour one of the plants before the pandemic. It's just amazing how they're able to create foam mattresses. But restoring the data, and what we have here is on the production line itself, we have an Access database that's collecting data. So when they have to scrap something, to indicate the reason for the scrap, and that shows up immediately in a Power BI report that's in the office. Before the system was implemented, it would take a week or two to analyze the data, and then they would go to the production line. You remember that production run you had last week or 2 weeks ago, where you had 8% scrap instead of 7% scrap? And they're like, "Lady, I don't remember what happened for breakfast yesterday. Much better." I can't remember what happened 2 weeks ago. But now with the Power BI, they can easily approach a production line real time and see and work with the people on the front lines there. Foam mattress manufacturing has a standard 7% scrap. It's very unusual in the sense that it's a high level of scrap. And it's funny because when I was on the production line, they were telling me, "You see this cube? They end up cutting this cube into matrices, and they call it a bun. And if there's any discoloration or any pockets in the foam, they just cut that off until they get to clean material. And the discoloration is funny because these mattresses are wrapped in cloth before they go off out of the factory, so nobody actually ever sees the raw material underneath. But that was their standard. Now, there's some misconceptions about using Access with SQL Server. The misconception is, I'll just use SQL Server Migration Assistant for Access and upload the tables and link them back to Access and then done. And that is far, far away from what the real reality is. Now, that may work for the most simple databases or for a new development that you just started where there's very little data in SQL Server. And the experience I've had is it takes a lot more work than just uploading the data and creating a database in SQL Server, especially when you do it for the cloud. Again, I want to emphasize you want to read the start here. So that's at accessexperts.com/start here. All right, these are some of the tools you're going to need. A lot of these are probably familiar with: SQL Server Management Studio, SQL Server Migration System for Access. We had the SSMA product manager on the MVP Summit several years ago, and he put up an interesting chart. It turns out the Access, because they have several SSMA, one for Oracle, one for other technologies, and the Access SSMA was the #1 by far used of all those conversions. More people are migrating Access to SQL Server than any other segment. And you also want to use the latest ODBC 17 drivers and OLADB 18 drivers for SQL Server. I put that ADODB list because back then when I did this presentation, it was recently announced that they were going to bring back ADODB after the huge outcry worldwide that they were going to stop supporting ADODB. So at least with that, and I'll be mentioning a little bit more about the drivers there on the presentation. Now, my first golden nugget is probably, it has nothing to do with SQL Server. You gotta fix your problems with Access first. You gotta make sure your tables have primary keys, because one of the nice things about Access is very forgiving, right? You can actually create an application without any primary keys or any indexes, secondary index, foreign keys, or anything like that. It'll work fine. But when you migrate the SQL Server, those tables do need primary keys at least. And then you want to make sure you fix the table designs, right? My point here is just because you're moving to SQL Server, that doesn't mean your problems are going to go away. You need to resolve your Access problems first before you make that migration to SQL Server, because it's just going to magnify your problems. It just is. If you got a table without a primary key, if that table does not become editable in Access once you link it, and we're so used to Access adding secondary keys because most Access developers configure the Access database so if the field ends with the letters ID, as in customer ID or vendor ID, and it's not the primary key, it adds automatically a secondary key to that table, which is called a foreign key, but not SQL Server. SQL Server does not do that. So you have to do that manually. Once you add a new table in SQL Server, you have to watch out for those foreign indexes and add those indexes, excuse me. So don't count on solving these problems later. Right? You want to address them now before it goes on. And the fact of the matter is, raise your hand if, for the most part, the databases you're asked to convert to SQL were designed by non-database people. These are people who, God bless them, they picked up Access, they learned the concept of tables, queries, forms. And, sometimes I look at this stuff and it varies widely. Sometimes I see great designs and sometimes I see really poor designs, but they all have something in common. They all are mission critical databases for their companies. Because why would they call me an expert in the field and use my firm? We're not cheap. I'll be the first one to tell you. I tell my potential customers, we're not the cheapest. We're probably one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive consulting practice. But the fact is, it's a mission critical app, and you want to make the investment, and that's where my due diligence comes in, and I analyze their current database. I tell them what their failings are and what we need to do. We will remove the SQL Server. Now, I'm pretty sure all of you are familiar with SQL Server Migration Assistant. We can do a whole chat just on that, but the fact is that it does a lot of the heavy lifting. Before SSMA, it was a pain because I had to use either Access itself to upgrade the table to SQL Server or use the import wizard in SQL Server to import data. And it was just not optimal. I'll give you an example. There is a issue where when you have a bit field in Access, right, that's usually used for yes, no, like a check mark. Once you migrate that to that yes no field, that's the data type, and right, true false, yes no in Access. But in SQL Server, it's called a bit field, where you can only have 0 or 1, right? Well, there's a bug, and known bug, where if you don't set the default value to 0 to those bit fields in SQL Server tables, it will not work in Access. You'll get error messages. Well, SQL Server Migration System knows that. And so when it sees true false fields in your Access table and does the migration to SQL Server, it automatically sets the default values. Now you can adjust that behavior. I wouldn't recommend you do that. But one of the ones I do recommend is to change the default from mbar character to varchar. So from mvarchar to varchar, which is my fourth sub bullet point here, because of the fact that mvarchar is good for applications that are international. You don't need that. You can save the memory. Now, this is something that hangs around since the early 2000s because memory was such a premium back then. But now these servers, the SQL servers, I mean, you can go out of Best Buy and get a server and it's already got 12 gigs on it, and maybe not big an issue when you're doing SQL Server Express. But nevertheless, the best practice is to use varchar whenever you can, because it takes less memory, right? Now, one big advantage of SQL Server Migration Assistant, this is something I covered in that course on SSMA, is we actually use it a lot throughout the project. That's the initial upload. We save the project file, and when we're ready to do an alpha beta, when we send a customer an alpha version, they want to test it with current data, right? A lot of times when we start a project, we grab their database, and but every time we grab it, it's already stale because that gets updated with new records after we grabbed it, so it's already stale data, or they change records on it. And so when I hand the customer an alpha version to test, I want to make sure that I upload the latest data to SQL Server. And it's so easy to do that with SSMA, where I can right-click on the database and select update data, and it just wipes out all the old data in the SQL Server tables and imports all the new data from your latest Access file. So the steps are: I grab another copy of my client's database, the backend. I load up my SSMA. I right-click and I'll say upload data. And then I hand my alpha version to my client. Says, okay, I just uploaded this video. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to compare the alpha version with your production version. It's an Access backend, and make sure that I have addressed any issues you had or any bugs you want to report it. And I do the same thing for the beta and the final rollout. It's just an easy, very, very non-hassle way of updating the database. So if you're only using this SSMA just for the first pass, you're really missing out. Now, I mentioned this point before, why is this just not enough? I think it sounds like a Bond movie. Not enough. Anyway, it's just you have all this power in SQL Server concentrated in revolving around, views and store procedures. And when you only use the table for storage, you're really selling yourself short. And I remember once I was interviewing another Access MVP to join my firm. And I asked him the question. I said, how much experience do you have with SQL Server? Oh, I got a ton of experience. I use it all the time. I'm like, all right, good. Let's talk about views and store procedures. Oh, no. I only link the tables to Access, and I do everything else in Access. Well, yeah, he ended up not being hired in my firm because it's like, it's like you're using a 4-cylinder engine. You're only using 1 cylinder. You gotta fire all 4 cylinders if you really want to max out the performance, right? And it was not George Hepworth that interview, by the way. All right. So in order to optimize the relationship between the two, you really need to learn how to create views and store procedures. Use CTEs. Can anybody tell me what CTE stands for?
Common table expression.
Yes, very good. Thank you. You need to optimize execution plans.
God's gift.
I rarely optimize execution plans, but sometimes you need to tweak them. You need to create additional indexes for foreign keys, right? Especially when you do joins between tables. And the biggest one that I feel that's going to really turbocharge your performance as well is you got to learn how to leverage ADODB. I'll give you for instance, there are domain functions, as you well know, like dsum, dmax, dmin. Those functions were never designed for a SQL Server backend, and they're a huge killer performance. I was we got hired because we have this special where we like the SWAT team for other Access developers, and they hire us to help them with their SQL Server projects. And one of my clients was also an Access developer. She inherited this database that used dsum and dmax and dmin everywhere. It was outrageous, and it was a huge performance suck. And she has now had to convert those to a SQL string and use an ADODB record set to query the SQL Server, and the performance is like night and day. So one of the things you want to do is leverage ADODB, and I have a great tip on that later on in the presentation. All right, so you uploaded the data to SQL Server, right, using SSMA. You're ready to start optimizing Access. You are itching to get going with views. Well, the first thing you want to do is, realize is SQL Server Migration System can convert all your queries to views. I don't do that. I think that's overkill. But you can. If you want to migrate all those objects in SQL Server, you can convert them all. It will not convert queries that reference an Access function. It will not create queries that use like temp bars for the criteria. And so there are exceptions. But for the most part, what I do is I don't convert any of my queries, and then I approach one individually. All right, so we created tables, we uploaded the data. Now we start running reports and opening forms, and we start addressing those queries that are just too slow, and we convert into views. And then the views become links in the front end, and Access thinks this is just not a table, it's a view. Now, slowness is an objective, right? It's subjective. I have once a developer came to me, one of my employees came to me and said, "Look, this report is taking 30 seconds to run." I'm like, "Okay, remember earlier today I told you we have a 3-second rule." And my employee says, "Well, we know we can optimize it, but we're already low on hours." And I was like, "Well, let's consult with the customer." So we submitted the beta version to the customer. We get a callback. It says, "Hey, Juan, you guys did great with that report." What do you mean? "Oh man, it's working great." "Oh, you mean the one that takes 30 seconds now?" "Yes. That thing used to take 5 minutes before an Access. And now that you move to SQL Server, it takes 30 seconds. Oh my gosh." Well, I'm glad you're happy, but you can really get it down to 3 seconds if you want, but we'll have to, we have to spend some more time. I said, "Oh, no. Let's not do that. That report, I run that once a month, and I can wait 30 seconds for it. Let's more focus on other parts of the project." So my point here is speed is a subjective thing, right? So what might be slow for you might be speedy for the customer. I'll give you a second example. Remember that franchise system? Well, they had a search form in the database that would load every customer in the results set of that form. So you have the criteria at the top of the form and the header. Then you have the details section with a subform with the results of the criteria. They were loading every customer in the database to when the form opened. So I haven't entered any criteria, and I've already seen every customer in the database, and it was slow as molasses for them because when I did the presentation, the customer says, "Oh my gosh, that's so much faster in loading that form. What did you do?" I tell you what I did. I didn't load any customer records. It just pops open with the criteria 1 equals 0, and you can it won't bring you back any records until you enter at least one criteria. And so he was really impressed that we made it so quick. All I did was not load any data, right? So there is some logical things that you can do in your applications to make them much faster. For example, you can load tabs dynamically. You can use code to unload the form on a tab when the tab access. This will be also another great presentation topic, by the way, on that technique. Or when you land on the tab, it actually loads that form and then queries the database. And sometimes, tab controls, I love them, but there can be easily 5, 6, 10 tabs on a form. And you don't really, some tabs are more popular than others. The only one that gets populated is the first one with that technique. And as user clicks on other tabs, and then the tab that they came from gets unpopulated, and the tab they're going to gets populated. And we've seen great performance increases with that. Now, in this first pass, you want to avoid using hybrid queries. Can anybody tell me what a hybrid query is? It's when you use a local table and a SQL Server table in the same query. Probably the worst performance killer ever. Why is that? Because when you have a query, what Access does, it sends it to SQL Server, say, hey, I need this query process. And SQL Server is like, analyzing the query, is like, wait a second, there's a table here I don't recognize. I recognize all these other tables. I don't recognize this one. So here, I'll tell you what. Why don't I send you all the data from these other tables down to your desktop, and you do the query, and then you can see the results on your end. So what ends up happening is these queries, these hybrid queries, are a huge performance killer because the user has to sit there and wait for all the data for all those other tables, and heaven forbid you would decide to do the order details table with that to download, and then it processes the query. So you see that progress bar for the query going a little bit so slowly.
Hey, Juan, I knew that was a performance killer. I've never heard the term hybrid query, though, to describe it. Is there?
Well, I've trademarked that. I should trademark that. Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah.
George, how many people do we have on the call right now? Give me a count.
I have to unmute myself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Great.
Counting you and me.
Okay, good. So, avoid using that. Now, there's some, I'll give you for instance. We usually have a table in your database of states, right? There's 50 states plus territories, right? So whatever that is, what is account for 50 states plus territories, maybe 55 or whatever it is. Puerto Rico's a territory, by the way. And you're like, okay, well, I'll just do this query. And they only want the sales for Florida. So I'll link it with the tables, states table. And you have the state tables on the front end because, you don't want to make that trip to the SQL Server when you have a dropdown in your database, right? So when you launch the order form and the state dropdown is reading from a local table in your front end file, great methodology. I applaud you for that. But then it kills your performance when you have that hybrid query. Instead, what you want to do in that case is have another copy of the state table in SQL Server. Link it back. So now you have two versions of the state table. You have one that's local and one that's linked to SQL. Actually, you don't scratch that. I don't even bother with linking the SQL Server table to the front end because I'm using either pass-through queries or views or some other methodology, AUDB, to send the query to the SQL Server. So, yeah, you want to avoid hybrid queries. This is a big one too. A lot of times you may be tempted to create a base view, and then your other views are based on that base view, and use the same view for many forms and reports. That works great until somebody comes along and chases your view, and now you get a call from the customer say, "Hey, man, all these reports, they're all messed up." And so I just have a best practice where every report gets their own view. You don't have to worry about chaining views. That's what CTEs are for, by the way. Common Table Expressions. Because here's why. When I first started with SQL Server, I would do what every Access developer does when they have a long chain of queries, right, to achieve a final result. So the technique here is you have query 1, query 2, query 3. So query 2 is based on query 1, query 3 is based on query 2, and so forth. And then the last query in that chain is the one you use in the report. So obviously when you open the report, it executes all the prior queries until it gets to the last one. Well, I would do the same thing in SQL Server. I create view 1, view 2, view 3 and the last view is the one that I need for my report. And so that's the one that will link back to the front end. The problem with that concept, although it works and it is supported, the problem with that concept is now you have an execution plan that's limited to just the last query. So I always want to use CTE, and that'll also be a great topic for a discussion here later on this year, where you use a CTE to contain all your queries in one query. And now you can assess the performance of the query right from there, and it's a lot easier to manage. I think it's a lot managed. Now, you will go and you can talk to 10 SQL Server experts. You might get different opinions on that, but I just love CTEs and it makes it a lot easier for you to manage my views that way. All right. So first pass, mostly views. Now, when you use a view with a form and you need to edit the data, keep in mind that table link, that view table link needs an index, local index. I have this on the article on the website too, but you have to create a local index on that view in order to use it to edit data. Otherwise, it's read-only. Now, here is something that's only seen a couple times in my career, right? Sometimes I have a very complex view, 10 tables, right? I mean, it's a monster view. And I'll bind that to a form. I give it an index. And then when the user goes to either delete or insert records, they get a message. Here's a message back from SQL Server saying, I don't know what you're trying to do here. What table you're trying to insert, what table you're trying to delete from, because a lot of these tables have the same foreign keys, and it's not clear to me that you want to insert a record into the order header table or the order details table or what have you. Has anybody else ever experienced that issue?
I did once, but it was not with a view. It was actually with ADO code.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it with ADO code.
Up.
I've seen it with views though, when I bonded the forms. All right.
Yeah, I saw it once in an accounting package where they needed to keep debits and credits in sync, and they used triggers. I didn't write it, so but they used triggers to make changes as the process through the transaction.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right. Well, that's what you need to do here in this case, right? You have to create the triggers, either insert trigger, delete trigger, which a lot of SQL Server table hate. They like the experts hate. They're like, oh, don't create triggers for your views because then they're hard to find and they're hard to troubleshoot. But I've only had to do it once or twice in my career, and recently we had to do it for a project we're working on for a factory here in Illinois. Here I say here in Illinois, like if I was in Illinois right now, but the company's located in Illinois, and the employee came up to me and says, "Yeah, I'm having this issue." I'm like, "Oh yeah, you need to create a trigger for that." All right, we talked about this, right? When you start, the search form, don't load any customers till they enter a search form. The other thing I see a lot is they'll load the form. If the program will load the form, and they bound to all the records in that table, right? And so I don't like doing that. I usually like to program the forms to open just the record you need. So there's no next record or prior record in the order form. Now, some clients don't like that. Some clients still want to go forward and backwards in the form's record set to see all the data. And so it's not always the case, but when in general, I try to do is I try to modify the SQL statement of the form to only load the record they're working on. So there's usually sequences. I give you a search form for orders. You pick the order you want. And I only load that order in the order form. I don't load all the orders in the orders table and then filter, right? I actually cut off. I just only use I use a SQL statement and I only ask for that order. We talked about loading tabs dynamically. Really nice technique. All right, so after the first pass, we talked about this. You do the alpha. Then comes the second pass. And the second optimization pass, now you're dealing with maybe CTEs. You're creating stored procedures, which are great for reports. Using pass-through query. Of course, you can't edit the data in pass-through queries. And it's a little bit more work, right? Because now you need to test your stored procedures and all that. And nothing wrong with creating stored procedures. Sometimes you need to do it to optimize. Then I give it to the customer a second time, right? So I say, okay, I just optimized it further. Let me know if you're happy with the speed. Now, you gotta be careful with these passes of optimization or rounds of optimization, because what's going to happen is I can do a lot more esoteric stuff in SQL Server. For example, I can create CLR. Does anybody know what CLR stands for?
Common Language Runtime.
Yeah, Common Language Runtime. Which basically is a .NET executable that runs in SQL Server memory. I've only had to do that once for a customer, but that's what we needed to do in order to optimize. But if you're not careful, you're going to spend a lot of the customer's budget for really small incremental speed, which I usually say it's not worth it, right? So I tell customers, look, I can get it down to, for example, I can make it down to a second, and they're still not happy with it. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, that's what I can do for that. They usually learn to live with it and move on, except for that one customer who actually downgraded back to a local SQL Server from a cloud.
Can I put in a comment here?
Sure.
So, for example, the report that takes 30 seconds to run, but he only runs it once a month, he was happy with that. But a query that takes 1 second to run, if it's run 20,000 times per day, that 1 second might be worth pushing a little bit further to get it to 300 milliseconds or whatever. So it's not only how long it takes, but it's how many times it's run.
Yep, that's a very good observation. You're right about that. Now, the latest version of SQL Server 2019, I love that version. I'll tell you why. It's going back to that same example. They run it 20 times a day, or 2,000 times a day, or 20,000 times a day. SQL Server 2019 is going to see that query execute constantly, and it's going to start analyzing it, the performance of it. And it's actually going to start it can either automatically add indexes where needed to improve the performance, or it can suggest those indexes to you so that you can implement that. I usually pick the auto, where it actually goes ahead and say, absolutely, go ahead and add the indexes. And I had a really good time with 2019 on my latest projects, because it really is. And that's only for the standard enterprise edition. It doesn't do it for the SQL Server Express edition. Number two, in terms of optimization and running the query so many times, is you may not be aware of this, and SQL Server Express does this too, which is wonderful. When the server sees that you're running the same query more often enough, it'll keep that query in memory. So it doesn't go back to the disk to read the results or anything like that. It actually keeps that execution plan in memory, keeps the query in memory, so when the next person comes along, asks for it. And we've all had these applications that are based on, there's one or two queries that run all the time. Either when the application loads, or when somebody's looking for an order, or somebody's looking for a customer record. They're just that kind of query that just runs all the time. And when I get calls back from my customer, they say, "Wow, what did you do today? It's running faster." And I tell them, "Well, tomorrow might run faster today." And I explain the concept of how SQL Server is learning from the queries and optimizing on the fly, or keeping the queries in memory. So it's just another reason why SQL Server is just wonderful about that. So keep in mind that it will see speed improvements, and you're like, I didn't do anything, but it's just managing your memory better. All right, so this is a big deal, right? In terms of being able to avoid. Remember with those dsum functions and dmin, a lot of times those are in code, and you have to move them over. You have to migrate them over to a query ADODB record set. Well, I came up with a methodology called easyADODB. You can search for that on the web. It'll take you straight to this article. And all that is just a way to easily run record sets, command objects, and ADODB from your code with just a single line. It's just a great way to maximize the use of ADODB, because then you don't have to worry about creating a connection object. You don't have to worry about binding the record set to the connection object every time, because if you do it the way Microsoft suggests, you end up with a block of code every time you use ADODB, and that gets really tiring. Instead, I just minimize that to one line, and I use a subroutine to handle record sets, and the other one to handle commands. Now, commands are basically update queries, right? Delete queries, insert queries, and so forth. Whereas record sets will return back data back from SQL Server. So look up easyADODB and implement that in your project to make your lives easier and be able to leverage SQL Server as ADODB in your projects.
Question, Juan. So,
Yes.
So over the years, we've heard the ADO, DAO debate. You're saying if your backend is SQL Server, ADO is the way to go?
ADODB is the way to go and access. See back in the code and the access code.
Yeah. So if
You're using ADODB in your code only. You're not using it in the front forms, right? It's just a code-based methodology where you have to add the reference, ADODB reference, to your references in the backend, right? In the IDE, Integrated Development Environment.
Okay.
And then you're establishing the record set dim rs as ADODB.recordset and dim con as ADODB.connection, and you're creating that connection that's going to bypass the DAO layer and go straight to the SQL Server using the driver, MSOADB driver, that you install for that project.
Okay, so that's interesting. I guess I asked because we've had this discussion over the years many times, and most people will say, well, let's just use DAO. We're familiar with it, but
not if you want to optimize and turbocharge your application for SQL Server. Who has used ADODB in their projects and noticed the difference with DAO?
I have, and I'll share an example. We had a very important application at Boeing when I still worked there. I'm no longer with Boeing. And we upsized it to SQL Server. It started out life in Jet. I had the opportunity when we got a trip to Japan and to test the application. And when we were in Tokyo, we were in an old hotel, and the internet speed was it was terrible. It was less than 1 megabit per second. I thought, let's try our new application, which was only ADODB, and it worked beautifully. Beautiful. Less than 1 megabit per second.
Wow, very nice.
Mm-hmm.
So you're bypassing that DAO layer, the DAO layer, and you're going straight to the server. And a couple things with that, right? Number one, when you use DAO, we're going to get into a little bit of weeds here. Stop me if you want me to stop, not to get too much. But when you use DAO, you're using the ODBC driver, right? So think about DAO ODBC versus ADODB MSOADB, right? So two different technology stacks. When you send a query to SQL Server that's got Microsoft Access syntax, right? I'll give you a perfect example of that. You may have a Access specific SQL statement that is not SQL Server compatible, right? Either because you're using a function in Access that SQL Server has no idea what it's about, or you're using a SQL Server SQL technique in Access that SQL Server doesn't reference. For example, delete queries. In Access, you have to state delete star from TBO customer where customer state equal whatever, right? In SQL Server, you don't put the star, you put delete from TBL customers. That's a very simple. That's a very simple example. Well, when you use DAO, the DAO driver, the ODBC driver, is the one that has to convert the syntax from JET to T-SQL. That's all it does. That's what's the job. The job there is to take your query and translate it to a language that SQL Server understands. Because SQL Server doesn't understand any Access SQL. It only understands T-SQL, right? Transaction SQL. But when you use AUDB, now you don't have that interpreter in the middle. It just goes straight to SQL Server. The only con with that is you have to use the right syntax, right? So when you create an AUDB query or record set, or command, you gotta use SQL Server syntax. There's an advantage to that because most of the times my queries, they start with SQL Server Management Studio. I create my query in SQL Server Management Studio, and then I paste it into my code using the wonderful tool that we have at AccessUserGroups.org, SQL Converter. Have you guys been using that to convert your SQL queries into VBA text that you can paste into your current program? Anybody?
Can you repeat what you said?
You know, when you have a query that you want to run from code, let's say, for example, it's like delete from TBL customers where customer state equal Florida and status equal inactive and the other parameters. It could be a long query, right?
Right.
Well, when you copy that into your code, you have to say strSQL equal double quote and then paste your query. Then you have to put wrappers at the end of each line and put the double quote at the end of each line, then ampersand, underscore. Well, we have a tool at AccessUserGroups.org that does that for you automatically. Did you know about that?
I didn't, but I tend to use Armin's method, where he uses a saved query and he adjusts the where clause on the fly with code.
All right, well, let's take a look at that tool because I think it's a real time saver. Side discussion here. So it's the SQL converter here.
Okay.
I'm gonna. So here, when I paste either an Access query or T-SQL, it doesn't matter one, right? So like star from TBL customers.
Oh, I think I played around with this a long time ago, and then I never really followed up.
What does it do? CTEs now?
No.
Hmm.
In join TBL orders. In join TBL orders. TBL customer ID. TBL customers, right? TBL customers. That customer ID equal. Now, usually I would use as a previous syntax, but I just want to make a point here. TBL orders that customer ID. All right, so you got this long query, and you convert over to SQL Server, but you can click on the VBA tab, and it's going to convert this to VBA, and now you can click on copy. And when you paste that into your code, it's nicely formatted. In this case, it didn't do the wrapping. It's not long enough. Let me go see if I can make this long enough. I'm just going to copy this. It doesn't look at the syntax, or it doesn't make sense of the syntax or not, but I'm just going to copy and paste. Go ahead.
I think there was a syntax error. I think that's maybe why you've got inner join on.
I know. I did a piss poor job in that. Let me see. Control V. Let me see. So now I got much more longer inner joins, I believe. So if I do VBA, it'll actually wrap over and automatically provide you with the wrapping. It could be that it needs proper syntax. You're right.
Yeah, the on is in the wrong place.
Yeah, so this will calculate the line breaks for you, and all you have to do is hit the copy button, and then it goes right into your code. It's a huge time saver because that way you don't have to worry about doing the ampersand and then the underscore and all that. And same thing with the SQL Server syntax. It just over here, once you get to T-SQL, it does that for you in the VBA tab.
Where is that? Where are you? Where did you find that?
AccessUserGroup.org. Let me see if I can grab a good query, long
No,
query, because
that's,
I really
that's
want
not what
this
I
here.
mean. Where did you find that converter?
Oh, we
It's
made
on the
it. We
web.
designed it. No, it's not on the web. We created this from scratch using
Oh. I think you showed us that once before, and I forgot all about it. But it's very cool because I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time doing that.
Yes, you do. We all do.
Can
I'm
you put
looking
the
for,
links
okay,
in?
I got a really complex query here. Here, let me do this now.
Can you put
Let
the
me see,
link on? Can you put the link on the chat?
yeah, let's go to AccessUserGroups.org and then click on SQL
There it is.
Converter.
Okay.
Here, you click on SQL Converter here at AccessUserGroups.org. So I got a really nice query here for you guys.
Yeah, I like that. That's
When I
nice.
click on VBA, it'll come back. See, now I came back with the line breaks. If you go to the end of this line,
Right.
you see the ampersand underscore and there for you. So I'm gonna go all the way to the end. You'll see it there. See, there it is. See,
Nice.
split it up for you. So yeah,
Nice.
you can,
Is there
go
a way
ahead.
to tell it how far you want it to go? Because I like to do a lot of breaks so I can kind of look at it. I don't want it going forever where I got to go scrolling all the way over to see what's in there.
Yeah, I no, that'll probably be the next version of this. This took a lot of work, and it was
I
all free
bet.
of charge. It was all
That's
free of
pretty
charge. You
nice.
can, if you click on this include BBCRLF, it will actually use that if you're so inclined. This one, notice they broke it even further. So now it's got 3 lines on there, and it uses the BBCRLF. So, but once you hit copy and paste in your code, I mean, this is a breeze. You know how long some of my queries are just forever. It's just so frustrating because it's menial work, and you hate to charge the customer for stuff like that.
Right. Thank you.
Please do keep in mind when you convert to SQL Server, you gotta pick the version, right? So when I convert this over to SQL Server, you get the little, oh, I got a little error there. So this is a SQL Server T-SQL equivalent, and then this one you can go to VBA, and then it'll also do the same thing here for you.
Wow.
So yeah. And notice that it recognizes there's a 256 character limit on a string, so it'll actually do this here for you. I mean, it's just a wonderful tool.
Wow.
Yeah, not enough people know about it, and I'm glad you guys had we were able to discuss it. All right. Let's see. How am I doing for time, George? Oh, we're at the hour mark. Good. All right. So a couple of things you need to know. That is, Access is terrible at inserting data into SQL Server. If you So for example, you normally import 100,000 records using CSV file into SQL Server. Well, most of us, what we do, including myself in the old days, I would import that into Access first into a local table, massage the data, right? And then do an insert query from a local table to a SQL Server. Remember we talked about hybrid queries, how slow they are? Well, those things, that 100,000 records, it will time out. Don't even try it. I mean, for 30,000 records, it'll take a few minutes, 5-10 minutes or whatever that is. You can go get a coffee break and do some water cooler talking. It'll still come back to your workstation. It's still not done. So do not use Access to insert lots of data into SQL Server with a local table. Instead, what you want to do is you want to use an XML import, and now you have to create a store procedure in SQL Server that accepts XML, and you convert that data to an XML format. And now you can upload it to SQL Server via XML, and that's super fast. Now, even with that, they'll take 100,000 records with no problem, but it won't take 1 million records at all. So that's still too slow when it comes to 1 million records. And now you need to create the SSIS package to import that data via SSIS. So just something to keep in mind is, and deleting data is the same way. Deleting data, if you were to delete, you create a delete query, right? Delete star from TBL customers. That takes forever. And you convert that to a pass-through query or use ADODB, it's a lot quicker. It takes like seconds because now SQL Server is the one that's doing the delete, not Access. All right. I'm just going to briefly touch on this. I love using SQL Server Security, and every time I have a CIO, I'm meeting with CIO for a large firm, I always emphasize this part where we're going to leverage their ADO security in order to use their user groups and be able to to integrate that in there, so make it easy for them to administer SQL Server. I mean, I'm just me sweet talking about into the ear of the CIO. One of the things that I've noticed in this job is I rarely get to sit across from a CIO. I mean, I can count on two hands the times I've worked with CIOs. Usually I'm working with department managers, businesses that have owners but no IT department, right? It's just, CIOs have more things on their mind, like ERP systems and other things to be bothering with a Microsoft Access developer. The whole reason why they hired me to begin with, because they didn't want to deal with the stuff, right? So the other day I get a call from a company in Ireland. And top of the morning to you, Juan. I'm like, hey, top of the morning to you as well. So I have a factory and then the north side of Chicago, in a town called Libertyville, that wants you to come in and take over from the assistant Access developer there, because they're having problems with him. I'm like, okay, well, I'll definitely be able to, but taking over the work is the worst thing, because, it's not easy for anybody. And that's all. Just look, now anybody is going to struggle to take over a very complex system where they worked on it for years. It's probably the most difficult thing you can do as an Access. So we do it all the time, but it doesn't make it any easier. So my point there is, it wasn't using ADO security. And so when I started talking about ADO security and leveraging ADO and security groups, he really did love it. All right. Now, sensitive fields. What's the example of sensitive fields? Social security number, credit cards. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I walked into a customer's office. They're storing credit card information, social security numbers unencrypted in Access database. It's a very egregious problem with security when they do that. And they write up to the customer, because I don't want them to come back to me. Oh, you never say anything. I'm like, no, I wrote you an email on this topic where I said we need to move the SQL Server and encrypt those columns. Right, so that's another topic, good topic there for Access developers. All right, do you guys have any further questions? By the way, I appreciate the questions and comments. It makes it easier. I live for that stuff when I'm presenting.
Can I make a suggestion that you didn't mention?
Sure.
When working with SQL Server, download Brent Ozar's free, oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank. What's it called?
Consultant Toolkit.
Well, the Consultant Toolkit is a paid thing. What's the one that it's based, that one was based on? His initial, I'm drawing a blank. Like SP Blitz First.
Yeah.
Oh.
Really good tools.
Yeah.
He has a Black Friday sale every year, and every Black Friday I buy all his courses in one shot, and then I give it to one of my employees to learn up, and it's just a great way to really learn more about SQL Server.
Because,
and
for example, earlier you mentioned, you have to make sure to index your foreign keys. Well, guess what? If you have one that's not, his tool will tell you that. It'll point that out.
Yeah.
It'll find it real quick.
Who is this?
Brent Ozar.
Okay. So I try to use that SSMA, which I've used before, but when I tried it more recently, it just gave me some, I don't even remember what it was, just some error, and I couldn't find anyone that could help me with it. So where do I find help with that kind of thing? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, you can try otheraccess.com. There are Access experts that seem to revel in the delight of being the first one to respond in that forum. So some of them might be on this call.
That reminds me of when I first found out about the internet, like many years ago, and they had those news groups, and you put a question out there, some really obscure thing, like 2 seconds later, somebody in France or Portugal or somewhere would go, oh, we'll just do this and this. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, people were just so generous. And they still are, in many ways. But
yes.
And there was no junk, because there was no World Wide Web. It was just these news groups. It was like
U.S. robotics.
Military, corporate, schools. It was only like top level people. So the level of discourse was so wonderful.
The downside of that is it killed textbooks. Of course, I've been on both sides of that, and people just don't buy books as much as they used to.
I've got a kid in college, and they still have them.
Oh yeah, they have to because they're required to for the courses, but it's way too easy to browse 3 or 4 different forums and get complete answers from people. There's no point in spending $50 on a book when you can get the answer and a directed answer for free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you lose something in the learning process.
I
was having a brain fart. It's the first responder kit. That's what it is.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I put it in. I put it in a comment.
Yeah.
If you can get a book for $50, you're doing really good in college. I can tell you that.
That's for sure. Well, these days they just rent them.
Juan, I wonder if you could do a little bit more on the CTEs. That's one concept I really hadn't heard of before. And I kind of gather it's, from what you said, it's a way of bundling up a number of queries into some kind of entity. Is that the gist of it?
Have you ever had a query that had massive subqueries in it?
Oh yeah.
Just ugly.
Oh,
the
totally.
CTE makes it much easier to get a handle on what. So basically, a CTE is moving your subqueries up to the very start of the query.
Really?
Mhm.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to have a developer that loved to do that.
Or send me an email and I'll send you a CTE paper I've got.
Is this Tom talking?
It is.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I
Yeah.
thought I recognized your voice, but
Trying to be respectful of Juan's time. We're into it an hour, and it's now what 11:30 where you are, right?
11:30, almost midnight here.
Okay,
In the
so-
Caribbean.
So if you're ready to continue, we're happy to hear what else you have to say. But
No, what I'm saying, look, the saying is CTEs are, please research. Look, the fact of the matter is, you're never going to get good at optimizing Access SQL Server until you learn how to use SQL Server Management Studio, learn how to create views, and learn how to create store procedures. You're just not. And this journey that I undertook many years ago has really been great. I love SQL Server Management Studio. I wish the Access IDE was just as good as that, and I'm hoping that with SQL Monaco coming later this year, we'll see. We're hoping that I get some of that intelligence as I write queries in Access. But you need to emphasize the fact that this is not easy, but once you do the first one, you're going to find that these SQL Server projects get much easier the second, the third, and fourth. So what I do is I offer Access consultants the opportunity to mentor them on their project. So it's a 10-hour block of our time where they're paired up either with myself or a senior Access consultant on my team. And they get 10 hours to work on a project side by side with them where I go in much more detail than I go here. Plus, I share a lot of my code with them and help them through their first project. And they end up being a great Access with SQL Server developer at the end of that. And they rarely need to come back to me and learn how to learn, more help. But though some of them have signed up for more hours, but it's a great way to, I call it the SWAT approach, where you call SWAT if you're a beat cop and you're calling me, I'm your SWAT team. When it comes to Access SQL Server, we don't make too much money off it, but it's not cheap. It's $235 an hour, and your minimum is 10 hours, so it comes up to $2,350. But I've had usually once or twice a year I sell that to another Access consultant where they would learn from me or one of my team members how to do something. So just keep that in mind if that's something you're interested in. All right. Any other comments, observations, questions, or criticisms?
You want to pull up the chat and see if there's anything else in the chat that we haven't addressed? I think there was one, and I'm scrolling back trying to find it.
All right. See if you can find it, George, because I'm not.
When you use SSMA, can you script and modify the script of the changes when that SSMA produces, or is that just, in other words, can you export the project plan that SSMA?
You can save the project, right? You can save the project, so the next time you open it up, you don't have to specify the access file, the SQL Server file, how to handle conversions or anything like that. And so that's what we do. So make sure you save it, give it a name, and then next time you need to do a beta upload or a final release, and you're ready to upload all the data to SQL Server, you can easily pull it up.
You can't edit it.
You cannot edit. No, you can't edit the extra code it uses, but you can set preferences, so you can tell it how to handle bit fields, change the way how it converts one data type and access to SQL Server. I usually don't change those settings, but no, I'm not aware of any. I'm not aware of any option like that. All right, guys. Well, look, this has been a lot of fun. I want to thank George, my host tonight, for inviting me over. I think this is George, you're doing a bang up job with this group, and I really appreciate you and the efforts you put in to get this off the ground, the Pacific Access Pacific group, as well as helping me with editing the videos. That's really been a lot of help. I think Zoom is really good. I think we might end up using Zoom with all the other groups in the organization. I know Europe wants to use Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to give Teams a try some point, but my initial 2 attempts to get it to work.
It's finicky. I'll tell you right now. Finicky. This has been
finicky,
seamless. Yeah.
But
It's been seamless.
Yeah, to me, I use Zoom a lot, so I felt more comfortable, and I wasn't sure I was giving it a fair comparison.
Well, we end up buying a license of WebEx, so anybody can use it, as we're aware, and then we can switch that money over to Zoom. We make a little bit of money when people like our videos and subscribe to our channel and watch the ads. It's just enough to cover some of it. But if you do see a video of ours, please like it and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. It really helps us a lot. All right, so this is Juan Soto saying so long from Puerto Rico. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night, and
thank you, Juan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you very much. I'll be in touch.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good evening.
Is there anything that came up in the meeting that you want to pursue further? We're past the hour, so we can quit anytime you're ready. And now Chad is.
I guess one question I had, and I kind of struggled through this, is the best vehicle to connect to SQL Server, and I guess from what I understand, you should be using views for the most part. Is that correct? The problem I had with a view, and couldn't wrap my head around, is you can't send a parameter to it.
That is about a 4-hour session. One
of the things that I think should be considered is temp tables, because if you load your temp tables locally, they can run the reports over and over again. You can do a lot of stuff with the temp table locally, and it really does speed things up.
It depends a lot.
You can put temp tables on SQL Server. It does require a little more effort because sharing, and you have to label them a little differently.
Right. Yeah. Temp tables on SQL Server would be one way to do it. I think views, in my mind, are primarily a way. Well, there are 2 uses. One is if you know that data is going to be used a lot.
Exactly.
You can create a custom view that brings only the fields that you're going to need, and maybe not the entire table. And the other reason is security. You can create read-only, or you can do other things to make those views more secure.
Yeah.
And
there are some companies that absolutely will not let you link directly to a SQL Server table.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
They'll let you use views, but not direct to the table.
if it has to be updatable, you have to be more careful about how you create the view.
One of the things, I mean, on some occasions, I've actually downloaded the entire table from SQL Server and into a temp table, and it does take a little while, but after that, everything goes very quickly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very different. I found it very difficult to do a where clause on a SQL Server table.
Well, you really can't do it in a view. You have to do it as a
Yeah.
stored procedure.
It's
You know,
a pain.
Well,
Dale,
no, I don't think that's true. And I did a lot of tests. I'm a rookie at this, so
okay, yeah,
right?
I misspoke. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the path I went down, and as I said, I'm a rookie at this. Is I've got multiple tables in the back end that are linked in a hierarchy of whatever. So I used a view to bring all those together, and a whole number of fields from all the different tables, and from all the records. And I was worried that what I was going to end up with is just a horrible performance thing, because I thought it was going to bring all those records across the wire. So through some experimentation, what I found is that if I have the access form itself has a where clause in it,
Yes.
right? And it sends that. Those are the only records that come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't understand that to begin with.
Yeah, that's the part where I misspoke. Yeah. When I said you can't go back to the view and parameterize the view.
Right.
Once you get the view, then you can apply your where clause.
Yeah. So is it a reasonable approach then to build a view that's got all the records in it, and the fields that you want from the tables that you need, and then let the form, with the controls we put on form to select the records, do it that way. And that's what I kind of worked my way towards that, but as I say, I'm just finding my way through this. So
Yeah, I would say it depends on whether you need that to be updatable.
you do want it to be updatable.
Yeah,
Yes.
the more tables you include in a query, the closer you get to doing something that will make it non-updatable. So it's as long as you're creating an updatable view, then
Okay.
it should be okay.
Yeah.
But Juan mentioned something, and I didn't want to interrupt the flow, but Dale took over one of my old clients. Was it Dale? I think. Wazoo, where we had the hybrid queries.
Yeah. So I really got bit by that as well. I built some local temp tables that had just a few records I wanted, and linked that to the view on the SQL Server, and oh boy, that's horrible.
It was you can't it's almost unusable depending on what you're doing. But we actually had two SQL Server databases, one local in-house and one behind the website, and I needed to update the website from the local, and I originally did it with a hybrid query, and it was horrendous.
Yeah.
Is that a term people are familiar with? I've never heard hybrid query.
I heard it maybe 2 months ago,
Okay.
something like that.
I've heard it for a while. I don't remember exactly.
I mean, I know the concept. If someone had asked me if you run a query with tables in different databases, I'd say, no, you don't want to do that. But I've never heard it called hybrid query.
How about heterogeneous?
Yeah, that I would have known.
Yeah.
Not the same, heterogeneous. But anyways, because I was just thinking, if I was sitting in an interview with him, I would have been like, huh? Even though I knew what it was, it's just different terminology.
Tom, was it you that said you had a paper on CTEs?
I do, yeah.
If I put my
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. And if I can, right now, Is there a way of posting it to?
Well, if you got a link, you can put it in a chat.
You can put it, that's another thing that I'm still struggling with a little bit. Several months ago, the website was updated, and theoretically, the chapter president's Dale and I. That is Dale 5, right? I still see his name, but he's not responding. Anyway, theoretically, we're supposed to be able to edit our individual sections, but I'm still not very successful. But there's supposed to be a way to put links and downloads up there. So maybe that's my next project. But yeah, if Tom can give you the direct link, that's quicker.
Yeah, I have a lot of these on my local hard drive, not direct link. So let me look for it. I found quite an extensive paper that I'd started to download, and that's from, I think he's in Israel. He's a SQL Server MVP. Itzhak Ben-Gan.
Yeah, he's in Israel.
Yeah. But on that paper, I never was able to finish it out because some of his images were no longer available. And so that was one of my attempts. But I think I have others for CTE. I will look for them.
That would make a good presentation all by itself, I think.
Yeah.
At some point, we should try to get somebody to do that.
Another resource I've used in my journey through this is a guy by the name of Wise Owl on YouTube. He's an excellent instructor and has some really good.
Yeah, I've run across his name. Yeah.
Okay, I just found a SQL file. Bert Wagner has a good example.
Okay. It sounds like I need to accelerate my learning curve. Is anybody a WordPress expert?
Yeah. Okay. Now let me go back to the chat and I can paste this in. So here's one of my CTE resources.
Okay.
So he's got a video that, watch the video first and then read the blog.
Okay, thank you.
So I do it.
I'm familiar with his name anyway, so.
I'm surprised that there is something that I was thinking Juan should have probably mentioned, optimizing anything with SQL Server, whether it's Access or whatever, just getting the best performance out of SQL Server. And that's, using execution plans and also set statistics IO on.
Yeah.
And looking to minimize logical reads.
Yeah, within his own group, I've seen presentations that he's done like a chapter 2, chapter 3 version of the presentation where he addresses those things. Yeah.
Brent Ozar, whose name was mentioned several times, as How to Think Like the SQL Server. Have you seen that?
Yep. Yeah.
One of those, yeah.
And I watched, I think, a couple different versions of that. And sure, someone does this, but the other day I was doing something, and all of a sudden ran the execution plan, and it said, "Look at this index is missing." You go, "Oh," and the light goes on. I understand what he's talking about now. Yeah. So,
yes.
And I think part of my difficulty, and I really dislike the term clustered index and non-clustered index because it doesn't mean anything to me. And I finally realized that a better name, I think, for a non-clustered index is a sorted copy with extra fields. And I think that because it is a copy of your database, of your table, I should say, and it's sorted in some way, and it can have extra fields with it, and everything's in one place if you can get it into that form. And
I've heard
that's been a good visual picture for me, I think.
I've heard some of the experts say the clustered index is your table. So I'm a little
Yes, the clustered index, that's true. And that, I would use the term something like original sorted data instead of clustered index, because it is your complete table. That's right. And it's sorted on the disk in the
quick quiz for everyone except Jack, because I'm sure he knows the answer. How many clustered indexes can you have on a table? I said except Jack.
clustered index. Yes, right. I was going to answer the wrong way. And
Anyone else know? Yes.
yeah, one.
Yeah, just one.
And that's because it is the data.
Yeah.
I approached this when I first started learning, thinking that an index was some magic thing, but it's not. It's the data stored on the disk in a sorted way.
Mm-hmm. My analogy is the old phone book for non-clustered indexes, at least, where.
Well, I know that's used a lot, but I don't think it's a good analogy.
Why's that?
Because you know what I was thinking? It's more like, I would think, an atlas book.
But tell me why a phone book's not good.
Because you can't put additional fields into the index in the phone book.
Sure.
Whereas in an included, you can include extra fields in a phone. It misses that part of the analogy. The analogy misses that part of.
You can have include columns in your.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Yes, on your index you can, but the phone book doesn't have that concept.
Yeah, I mean it kind of does, because it has name and phone number, and a lot of the old phone books had the address as well.
Okay. Anyway, that's the nice thing about analogies, is they all break down at a certain point. Anyway, I think the biggest thing I got here tonight is I got to go and look at CTEs and see how that can impact. I've been struggling with a complicated query with a lot of subqueries.
To me, it's a more logical way to structure the query than embedding subqueries.
Okay.
And then the best part about it is you can get each part. You can stack them. So each of your expressions, you can make sure that it works and returns the records you want to see, and then add the next one, and then add the next one. And at the end, then you basically join those CTEs together into your select statement.
Got it.
And so you know why you get to the point where you're doing that final.
I'm trying to remember. I think it's a semicolon, but after the last CTE and before your select, you need some character that tells SQL Server, this is the end of all my CTEs.
I'm not sure that you even need to do that, but
I'm pretty sure you do. You can run one without it and see.
Well, yeah, I'm not gonna. I'm trying to get to where I can actually get to my SSMS. I see if I can find one. It'll take about 100 hours for this to start.
Unless if I was confusing that with Oracle, maybe Oracle's the one that requires it.
That sounds right, yeah.
So what I've been doing is writing the very long, complicated query in SSMS, and then just highlighting the part of the subquery and pressing F5 to get that, and doing that piecemeal. But it's really awkward to do that.
Yeah. It makes it a lot more readable to have the CTE.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the tip. One thing I didn't follow up with one, and maybe you guys know, he kind of alluded that you can use ADODB to replace things like DLOOKUPs. Is that true? Or did
Looks
I
like
miss it?
I see a comment from Crystal. Looks like I sent it just to you. I meant to send it to everyone. I don't know how that happened. So I'm going to resend
Oh, you know
it.
what? It is because I sent the original question to you directly.
Okay.
Is probably what happened.
Now Crystal should see it.
Thank you, Tom. I see it.
Oh, and your sound is back.
Yeah, I thought I had the microphone set right, but I didn't.
Well, we're all learning our way through this new system. I'm trying to find a view that I have with CTE, and of course,
You know, one thing I think is kind of funny is that for SQL Server, views do not support order by. Oracle has no problem with order by in views.
well, it tells you that, but you can put them in if you use select top 100%.
Yeah, you don't have to do that fancy dance in Oracle. You don't have to do select top, whatever.
My
just say-
experience is
What?
that it doesn't actually work.
So
In
you're saying
SQL
We'll
Server.
save it, yeah.
if you put top 100%, then it'll accept the order by?
Yeah, but I'm not sure that it actually does what it's
Oh,
purported to do.
I'll try that.
It's just kind of funny that Oracle has no problem with an order by, and Microsoft doesn't seem to want to compete that far.
They're very funny. Okay, they're very funny that way. So here's a view that I have with CTE in it. I just got a crash.
All I'm seeing is
Okay, one of the things with screen sharing in Zoom is when that screen comes up, you have to pick the right element. You can either get your desktop or a application.
yeah, we're just
Well, I got kicked out of the meeting. Fortunately, apparently it didn't end the meeting. Whew.
I have a comment about going back. I couldn't say anything because my mic wasn't set up right, but on the clustered and non-clustered indexes, my understanding is that the clustered index is the primary key index.
it doesn't have to be. It oftentimes is, but it doesn't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting.
So this is a view with a CTE in it. So it starts with a with clause, and you name the table, and you select the fields that you want to include in it.
So in that case, family line is a table?
That's the name of the CTE, family line.
Yeah, that's the common table expression that I'm going to use.
Oh, okay.
And it is then within the parentheses, just a regular query. And then it closes. So from here to here. And see, Tom, then it jumps straight into the.
Yeah, okay. I think it's Oracle then
So
that you need a delimiter in between.
Yeah, I haven't worked with Oracle for
I know I got bit by it once.
10 years, and I think I seem to recall that was it bit me when I was trying to learn Oracle. But see, then, and I'm trying to remember what this thing does. Basically that's the syntax. So this then you can actually get it to work correctly to return the records you want, and then join it, and then it joins into the regular select.
You know what I'm pretty sure what that's doing. That's showing like a parent-child relationship, a hierarchical.
Yeah, that's what it was intended to do, and I haven't used it for so long I've forgotten. But I think this syntax here is intended to do the recursive hierarchical part. It's like a family tree.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there it is. There's the recursive. Yeah. Anyway, It's not probably the best example of a CTE, but it's the first one that I ran across. Okie dokie. Well, we're well past time again. So for those of you who are staying with us, I appreciate it. I will work on the video, get it published in the next couple of days. Next month, I believe I have a firm commitment from Anders, who is, where does he live? Crystal? Is he in Denmark or?
He's in Denmark.
Denmark, yeah. He's a Danish MVP, and he's committed to do a session, and I think that is scheduled for next month. I have to verify that.
Okay, well, thank you for your efforts, George. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's a great speaker.
Yeah, he's very good at presenting in a easy to access manner. Yeah. So yeah.
I think you can just say he's very good at everything.
Oh yeah. Yeah, actually, and he's been out here to Washington to MVP summits several times, and I have taken him on hikes up and down the mountain behind me. He kept up all the way. So,
what part of Washington are you in?
I live in Newcastle, which is a suburb of Bellevue.
Ah, okay.
So, yeah, like I always say, I can see Bellevue, and that's as close. See, I can see Bellevue out my bedroom window, and that's about as close as I want to get.
Oh, come on. I live in Bellevue. So.
I'm sorry, Tom.
He knew that when he made that comment.
Yeah. But you
waiting to get a rise out of me.
I know, but yeah. Anyway, he's been up on Cougar Mountain with me a couple of times when he came out for summits.
You're not all that far from me. I'm just right on the border with Delta.
In Delta. I thought you were in BC.
I'm in BC, yeah, Delta, BC.
Delta, BC, okay.
Right at the mouth of the Fraser.
Oh, okay, perfect, yeah. We're all out here. And
good. Anyway, thanks. Good night.
Thanks. Good night, everybody. I'll see you next month. And I'll talk to you tomorrow, Crystal. If I don't take another nap.
Well, I'll just wake you up.
All right. Well, we'll see how that works.
All right.
All right. Good night.